Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reading Crossbow podcast. My name is Lana, and today we are talking about the Serpent and Dove Trilogy by Shelby Mahurin. But before we get into that, a quick bit about our show. We are normally a two-person podcast, myself and my co-host Rob, and we read 2 books a month together, and we each do a solo episode. We typically focus on fantasy books here, particularly in the romantasy, grimdark, and sci-fi categories. And we've covered a lot of books on this show, so please go back and check those out. Also, like and subscribe. I'm asking right now because we are getting close to 500 subscribers, and we're going to hit that first level of partners. So if you like supporting small shows, small streamers, small creators, please hit the subscribe button. We won't bug you, we promise. So, Serpent and Dove Trilogy. Let's talk about this. First off, what is the entire series about? Well, the series covers a century-old conflict between witches and the church. And it focuses on a love story between 2 unlikely lovers, a witch and a witch hunter. Now, we've covered the first book before. This was a book that I recommended on our show last year. Rob had to read this with me, and surprisingly, he actually gave this a pretty good review. So we both put this up as a thumbs up. We recommend it. It wasn't rated highly. This is not a 5-star book. This is like a 3.5-star book. But you know what? In romantic fantasy, that's not so bad. So, overview of the entire series. So we have Lou and Reed, which I mentioned before, a witch and a witch hunter. In the first book, they are brought together through unlikely circumstances and have to get married. I'm not giving a lot away here. It's in the jacket. But basically, we cover the backstories on Lou and Reed in the first book, and this sets up the story for the entire series. It actually stands alone pretty well because I put a lot of time in between the first and second book, several months before picking up the second one. And I have to say, I feel like the first book ended in a way where it's like, yeah, okay, if I don't read further, this is not the end of the world. It does cliffhanger a bit, but enough where like it could almost be standalone. But the backstories of the 2 characters is that Lou has fled her coven. So there's 2 covens, basically. There's a Dame Rouge and a Dame Blanc. And these are the witches formerly part of one witch tribe that actually ruled these lands centuries ago. And her mother, Morgane, is basically the sorceress or queen sorceress of this witch coven, and she is trying to sacrifice Lou for a spell that's going to defeat the king. It not only will defeat the king, but it will defeat his entire progeny, which we find out in the first book. Mini spoiler, not too bad. I mean, I have to say this part. You can pause right here if you want to skip it, but Reed finds out he's a witch. He's one of the only male witches out there. But anyhow, I need to tell you that because that leads us into why he wants to team up with Lou to take down the church. And it's not so much that he even wants to take down the church, it's just that he wants to see a better king in power and hopefully some sort of unity between the witches and the church, because he believes, along with Lou, that magic can exist in this world without being outcast. Because for at least a century now, it's hard to determine the timeline in this book, the church has deemed that magic cannot exist in their lands and they've banished it. So the witches and all magical creatures live on the outside of this kingdom, and the chasseurs, who that's what Reed is, he's a witch hunter, are tasked with keeping magic out of the kingdom, tasked with keeping these magical creatures at bay. So throughout the series, it basically goes like this. It goes backstory, why are the witches and the church at war? A little bit into the mythology behind it all, because there's a lot of mythology in these books, and you can see that as we get to the title Gods and Monsters. So that's how the first book is set up. The second book is set up in terms of bringing allies into this war so that they could bring down the king, because the king is unjust, he's unfair. But we also don't want the Dame Blanches leading either, because Morgane, Lou's mother, she's not a good person. So finding allies here. We'll go into each of these books individually a little bit. And then we get to Gods and Monsters, which is deep into the mythology of these books, of the Dame Blanche, of the Dame Rouge, of how they came to exist, how this world came to exist, how they split apart, how their magic was separated, and how the church came to rule. So the why behind it all. And throughout this is a beautiful love story between Lou and Reed. So let's dive into each of these books individually. Should you read them? Let's find out. Let's find out why. So the first book we've already covered, as I mentioned before. We have a whole episode on this. But this is truly about Lou leaving her coven. She has to find a way to exist in Reed's world. She can't go to her coven. They want to kill her. She can't go to the Dame Rouge, which is the Blood Witches, because she's a Dame Blanche, and they will kill her. She's the daughter of the sorceress of the Dame Blanche. She cannot live in any world. She's outcast. She cannot practice magic either, because if she does, her mother will sense it. Also, magic has this interesting smell. So through unlikely circumstances in the first book, she ends up teaming up with Reed. This is in the jacket. I'm not giving much away. They have to get married. And basically living around her and being in this forced proximity with her, he starts to suspect some things about her. And maybe he knows subconsciously that she's magic, that she's a witch, even though she's trying to hide it. And she also finds out that he's wrestling with his own demons. So together, towards the end of the book, they learn, the mystery comes out, the secret comes out that she's a witch. This blindsides him. They recruit friends along the way to help them out. But basically, we end the first book with Lou stepping into her power. So she hasn't used her magic in years. Morgane is trying to take down the kingdom. That's her mother. Lou's frantically trying to hold on to his religious beliefs and who he is. This is how he's been brought up his entire life. He's trying to hold it together. He loves Lou. He's learned to love her through this forced marriage. And he has conflicting demons about loving a witch. He's a witch hunter. And then Lou has to embrace her magic, even though she's had to not use it for all of these years. So we end the first book with Reed wrestling his love with her, and Lou embracing her magic. So we end there. So nothing's really resolved with the kingdom, but a great story either way. Let's get into the second book. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the second book because the second book, you guys, the second book is great. Okay, so this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen in books usually, that the second book is good. This doesn't happen in movies. Usually the second book or movie is a filler movie. But the second book is where the magic really begins to happen. And maybe it's just because I think I have a strong I'm going to say, for blood magic now. So I haven't read books with blood magic, and this is very interesting. So we have the titles here, Serpent and Dove, right? This is exactly what you'd think it would be: the snake, the dove, the mouse, the wolf, things like that, back and forth, enemies to lovers. That's the first book in a nutshell. Then we get into the second book, Blood and Honey. You can see by the red cover, we're going to dive greatly into blood magic in this book. And the last book, Gods and Monsters, you can see this almost looks ethereal. We're definitely getting into the gods more in this book. So, second book. Why do I love this book so much? Well, if you read the series just to read this book, I think you'll be happy. It's a great book. So really what we have is we've left off at the end with Lou stepping into her magic. Morgane's still out there, the king's still ruling, and she has to find a way to take down her mother, eliminate her mother basically before she's eliminated. So it's mother against daughter. Only one can be the sorceress. So in order to do this, she has to find allies. So the second book is completely about sourcing allies. Now, keep in mind, we don't know much about the magic that exists in the world, because in the first part of the book, we're in Cesarine, which is where which is the kingdom, which is where Reed is a witch hunter, and he's tasked with keeping magic out. So we don't get to learn a lot about what's outside of the city walls. We get little bits. So this book is all about finding that, discovering that, and what's out there. And so Lou is conflicted because she has to defeat her mother, but she can't go to the Dame Blanche. The Dame Blanche want to kill her, even though she has friends within the Dame Blanche. They cannot go against Morgane's orders. So if she wanders in there, they're just going to kill her. And they have the Dame Rouge, right? And the Dame Rouge also wants to kill her because she's the daughter of Morgane, who's awful. So, but Coco, who's a secondary character in this book, is a Dame Rouge, and she's Lou's best friend. Well, of course, since she's Lou's best friend, Lou's going to look to her for help, and Coco recommends her aunt, which is the leader of the Dame Rouge. So, not going to go into much about how they form this ally, but they go to the Dame Rouge for help. Now, this is where the book gets really cool. This is where the magic gets really cool, because blood magic in this book is Very interesting, very complicated. So I haven't talked about it too much, but magic exacts a price in this book. And you guys know, if you've watched our show before, that I love when magic has a price. I don't like it when anyone can poof magic out of the air. There should be a price in all of this. So the Dom Blanc, they use magic that exists around them, but they have to exact something from their self for it. So for example, it's like eye for an eye. So if you take a memory from someone because like you're sneaking around and they saw you and you don't want them to remember they saw you, then you have to take your own memory. So it's a trade. Now with the Dom Rouge, it's blood magic. So they actually have to cut from themselves, use their own blood. They mix this with other elements and materials to get the magic to work. So for example, in the first book, Coco uses her blood with lavender. We all know lavender. Lavender is supposed to make you sleepy. There's lots of lavender products out there, so this makes sense. So blood and honey. Honey is a life force. So in this book, we're dealing a lot with blood and life, and Coco's saving the day a lot, really. So the magical sacrifice of blood in this book is so cool. Imagine, if you will, because this is a scene in the second book, like a landscape of snowfallen land, Dom Rouges all in a circle, red capes, different relics around them with runes and ashes from their ancestors. And this is just cool. If you like magic, I really think you'll like this book. But outside of the Dom Rouge and finding allies, they also have to find more allies, because the Dom Rouge are not enough to defeat the Dom Blanc. The Dom Rouge have been outcasted from the chateau where they once lived together with the Dom Blanc. This is centuries ago, okay? Now they're outcasted and they're in famine. They've really dwindled their numbers, so they need more. So Lou and Reed go to the werewolves. Yes, there's werewolves in this book. Also, there's a cool story between werewolves and Reed and how he became captain of the Chasseurs. So I'm not going to go into that, but it's neato. And then still, even with the Dom Rouge and the werewolves, it's not going to be enough. So somehow in this second book, they have to find a way to at least bring some of the Chasseurs to their side, because they basically need an army at this point. They need swords, they need steel, along with the magical creatures. So that's the majority of the second book. Now, a lot also happens here, right? They make it to the castle. They're trying to get the king on their side as well. They're trying to convince him that Morgane is bad news, because he doesn't know, the king has no idea that this sacrifice that she needs to do with her daughter Lou is actually going to wipe out all of his children. So they're trying to warn him of this. They think that'll be enough to get him on their side. But if you read it, you'll find out that it's not. So it kind of ends, the second book ends with these allies, the Rouge and the werewolf and some of the Chasseurs, making it to the king and trying to get their aid. And he's like, hell no. And then it all ends in fire. I'm just going to say all ends in fire. Definitely ends on a cliffhanger, much more so than the first book did. The second book is badass. It's amazing. You should read it. I'd read the whole series just to read the second book again. This takes us to the third book. The third book is Gods and Monsters, and much like the title proclaims, we go way back. It reels it way back to how this story first began. How did the Dom Rouge separate from the Dom Blanc? How did the church build up? How men in the society, because the witches, they're all female. So it's almost this also fight between men and women and a lover's quarrel that started all of this. If you like mythology, then you will love the third book, because it takes it way, 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 way back. We find out that Lake Melancholy, which is in the first book, it's referenced a bit from all this, is from a witch's tears originally, and she was scorned by a lover, and very cool. Let's get into the coolest part of this book. So we're trying to take down Morgane. We're trying to take down the king. This still hasn't happened. And not so much take down the king, but put a new one in his place, right? Like we just need to get different leaders. It's not that the witches need to not exist or the kingdom needs to not exist, but someone else needs to lead them. So it needs to be a change of power for this world to be right again. All right. So let's take you to the best part of the third book, because the third book is slow, so slow. You can see it's much longer than the other books. So the best part of this book is when we're going way back to find out kind of the mythology of this all and how it all began. And we go to the ocean, we go to the sea. And what does that mean? I didn't see it coming either. Mermaids. Okay, I don't know why, but it's cool. So I'm going to paint another picture for you. The seas part, not going to tell you why. And we go to one of the most original, like one of the sorceresses, witches that began this all. She's in the sea. Well, they part the sea, the mermaids grow legs, and they dry out a section of their city so the humans can come visit them and work on this pact together to take down Morgane. And I just think it's so cool because the mermaid want to impress the humans. And so they forage from shipwrecks and they take chairs. Like think about the Titanic even, and taking cool things from that, jewels and treasures and tables and soft plush couches and pianos, and arranging them so that these humans can come into your city and feel welcome. And it's just so cool. And the author spends a lot of time in this part of the book. We get many pages on this. I want to say it's a third, but I didn't actually measure. And I could have a whole book on this. I could have a whole series on this. This was really fantastic world building and the best part of the whole book. So they build this pact, and you expect the mermaid to help because they can come on land when they grow their legs, and help with the battle, but they really don't show up again. They come back a little bit here and there. There's a war towards the end. We see these little naked mer people, I kid you not, running around to come help aid them, but that's it. So we had all this beautiful magical buildup for this part of the backstory that didn't really show up towards the end of the book. And I realize I'm letting you down now, but hang in here with me. The book resolves. The king gets his due. Morgane gets her due. A couple characters who you wouldn't expect come back. We also dive into a little bit more of the magical creatures. We get a dragon, of all things. So there's a dragon in the last books. We get mermaid and dragon added into the werewolf and the witches. And it's a bit weird. I'm going to tell you it's a bit weird, but hey, it's a magical world. But what does this do? Because I might have just let you down, right? This builds another arc for this world. We're going to put a pin in that, and I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. But should you read this trilogy? Does it sum up? Is it worth it? Yes. I think the love story between Lou and Reed is worth it. There's a twist in the third book that takes them apart and brings them back together again, where if you are lovers of this romantasy world, a romantic fantasy, and you love fates, and not fated mates though, not fated mates, but two people who really should belong together, then I think you'll like the third book as well, because yeah, cool plot twist between Lou and Reed, separate them and bring them back, but it brings them back because they really should be together, which is neat. So, should you read this trilogy? Yes. Why? Well, if you're like me, you might be having a little bit of fatigue. I have romantic fantasy fatigue because I'm a little bit done with dark academia. I'm definitely done with elves and fated mates and fae. I've had too much of it. Honestly, I might be taking a break, and I might be doing an episode on that. But even though this book series isn't as good as a lot of the book series I've read in the past, think about your Crescent Cities, your Akatars, your Throne of Glass series. Throne of Glass is one of my favorite book series. This comes nowhere close to that. However, it does take us out of those elements that I feel are being copycatted too much. So if you want something a bit more original, especially when you get towards the second and third books of this series, then I would absolutely pick this up. If you're someone who loves like your Brandon Sandersons, like that type of epic fantasy, you're probably not going to like this series because the writing isn't deep enough to bring you in if you've read books like that. So yes, strong recommend if you're already reading romantic fantasy and you just need a break from what's out there. Now, this brings us to talking about what's next, because I said, whoa, wait, does this story keep continuing? I have not read it yet. But there is a duology based around another character in this series that I didn't expect. I only found out about this before prepping for this episode. Seely, who is a character in this series who's definitely not a main character. She's just a tertiary character. She's in the background. She's just this pretty little doll thing. She gets her own duology. And I have a feeling that this is probably where Shelby Mahurin is going to step into her own as an author, because Shelby was getting pretty good towards this last book. In the first book, it was okay. Second book got great. Third book got really good with that sea scene I was telling you about. But I feel like she's still finding herself. This is her first book series and not quite there as an author. I hate to say that. I never know if authors are going to read this. But I had got a feeling by the end of the third book that she was flexing her muscle. And I don't know, if you've read those series, let me know, with Seely in them, because I want to know if they're worth the read. Because I have to say, as a reader, after finishing up this series, I'm kind of done. I don't feel the need to go into the rest of the story. However, I love books about vampires, and it looks like the spin-off series with Seely has vampires in it. And also, change up, Seely's going to become a female witch hunter, the very, very first. So I love the idea of that. I love that so much more. So I really hope some of you read this and let me know how it goes. I can also see there becoming more spin-off books, especially particularly from the sea creatures, if that happens again. I just feel like there's a lot more to dive into here in the world, and I'm sure Shelby Mahurin is not done. So, should you read this? Yeah, give it a try. Should you subscribe to our show? Yeah, absolutely. We're almost there, trying to hit those 500 followers. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and join us next week as Rob and I jump on the show together and cover yet another book from the romantic fantasy world. And let's see what Rob has to say about that.